Welcome back to Spoiler Free Wrestling, everyone. And for the last couple of months, there have been numerous rumors and reports about WWE superstars requesting their release from the company. Now, in the case of Hideo Itami, in the case of TJP, in the case of Ty Dillinger, they all publicly asked for their release and were granted it. However, in the case of Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder, the current Raw Tag Team Champions, The Revival, they are reported to have requested their release and had their request denied. Now, numerous wrestling news outlets began to report in mid-February that anonymous sources were claiming that Dawson and Wilder had requested their release from the company. Now, according to recent comments that Dash Wilder made to The Mirror in the UK, these reports about the team having requested their release didn't get all the facts correct. Some things got lost in translation. And Dawson and he decided to have a little fun with the internet afterwards. So let's get right to what Wilder said. Now, he was asked about the reports that the Revival had requested their release from WWE, and he was hesitant to answer the question. He said, "I won't touch on it too much, but what I will say is that it was lost in translation. There were some things that got out there that I don't think people knew the full story about." So he would later say in the interview, well, he and Dawson weren't aggravated or frustrated by the reports. They did decide to have some fun with them. So he said, "We'll have fun with the internet over that, as they don't know what's what, so we're not going to tell them otherwise." So what exactly did Dash Wilder and Scott Dawson do to have fun with the internet over these reports? Well, let's go back to mid-January when the reports started to surface and see if we can figure out what Dash Wilder is talking to. All right, so things started out with a website called bodyslam.net. They started to report that Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder had asked for their release from the company, and this was being spurned on by Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful. I guess it sent out some tweet that was saying Scott Dawson and Dash Wilder might be on their way out of the company, might have requested their release from the company. So this then makes the rounds on the anonymous source-based wrestling websites and is addressed by Brian Alvarez of the Wrestling Observer newsletter on Wrestling Observer Live Radio. And he said, "The only thing I can tell you about the Revival right now is I don't know if they asked for a release from WWE, but I do know they've been asking about doing more matches down in NXT." So that could have been something that was lost in translation. Did Dash Wilder and Scott Dawson really request that they be removed from the main roster and go back to NXT? That's a possibility. Now, additional details were later given to Pro Wrestling Sheet regarding why the Revival may have requested their release from the company. And so here's what was reported on by the Pro Wrestling Sheet. They said, "Sources tell us the tag team's decision to ask for their release was based on how little time and respect the division is given. We're told the duo is frustrated about the lack of promos, backstage segments, and direction of the division, not just for themselves, but the entire division, such as the tag match on Monday being used as a cutaway segment." Okay, so they basically, in this report to Pro Wrestling Sheet, their sources, which if it wasn't the Revival themselves, I don't know why they're printing it, but their sources were saying that the Revival requested their release because of how poorly the tag team division is booked. You'd be hard pressed to say that hasn't changed recently. If you go to the Fastlane pay-per-view on Sunday, there were 3 tag team championship matches on the main show. There's usually none. And so Dash Wilder did talk about sort of the change that has occurred in the tag team division recently during this interview with The Mirror in the UK too, talking about how the tag team division quite often, even the tag team title matches would only make it onto the kickoff shows. That definitely is something that we've seen change recently. And so here's what he said in the interview. He said, for instance, and this might not sound like that much of a deal, last night was our first time on the main card of a pay-per-view since our call-up to the main roster in 2017. We'd only done kickoff shows. It was the first time that the Raw Tag Team titles have been defended on the main card of a pay-per-view almost a year. We wanted that, to say we were on the main card. That was a step for us. So we're finding life at the top as more work than ever. If that answers your question in the longest way possible. So yeah, I mean, you can't say for sure that some of the Revival's comments had any type of impact on the way the tag team division has been booked, but there's definitely been a change. Another notable part to this story is that Dash Wilder applied to trademark the term #FTR on New Year's Day this year. And though that hashtag has made its way onto the back of Dawson and Wilder's trunks during their matches this year. So that's another part to this story. And perhaps the biggest potential piece of troll job that the Revival did, not long after winning the Raw Tag Team's titles, Dash Wilder put out this tweet saying, "Complain long enough and you can achieve anything, the Revival." But then possibly in a comment meant to troll some of the fans on the internet who feel they know more than perhaps they do, Dawson wrote, "Complain long enough and you can achieve anything, the Revival." And then he attributed that quote to the internet fans. So when it comes to the Revival, I don't think we're really going to know the full story until they want us to know the full story. But the good news about the Revival right now is they are sitting atop the Raw Tag Team division. They are the current Raw Tag Team champions. And to go over some stats. So the lineage of the Raw Tag Team titles goes back to the WWE Tag Team titles. Whereas with the SmackDown Tag Team titles, those just go back to nothing. They're the SmackDown titles. The titles that are on the Raw brand, their lineage goes back to 2002 when they were the WWE Tag Team Championships after the first brand split. Does that make sense? No. Okay. Great. So the Revival are, under that lineage, the 58th team to win these titles. And they are, what does that make them? And they are currently in the middle of the 72nd reign of Tag Team Champions. Now, they don't have to hold the titles very long to hold them for the longest time in modern history. Since the New Day's 483 tag team title reign ended on December 18th, 2016, no team has held the title for longer than 80 days. That was the Deleter of Worlds, Bray Wyatt and Matt Hardy. So the Revival could quickly become one of the better tag team champions on Raw in the last few years by just holding the titles for 2 more months. All right, so we've got more highlights from this interview up at Spoiler Free Wrestling. You can check out the full interview with the Mirror UK and some links to some other articles as well. Thanks again, everybody. I'm the Eye Guy from Spoiler Free Wrestling.